As the sun wrapped the streets of Los Angeles in a golden veil, an old but steadfast auto repair shop on the outskirts of the city was still open. Inside, under pale fluorescent lights, a lone man was working. Henry Carter, 72 years old, calloused hands, posture still upright and proud. He slowly wiped the motor oil from his palms. He had worked alone in this shop for years. Big automotive chains had come and gone, but Henry's garage was still standing. Maybe he didn't have the money for fancy decorations, but people trusted him. And trust was the rarest spare part in modern times. But trust didn't pay hospital bills. Henry pressed lightly against his chest and winced. That familiar pain was there again. "It's just exhaustion," he told himself. "I don't have time to deal with illness right now." Just as he was about to close the shop, a muffled, rattling engine sound from outside caught his attention. When he turned to look, a Ferrari was approaching on the dust-covered street, a dark red classic model. With smooth curves and the final grumble of its tired engine, it came to a stop in front of the shop. The engine fell silent, quiet. Then the door opened. A tall, broad-shouldered, mountain-like man stepped out of the car. He wore a black leather jacket, worn-out jeans, and a smile that caught the sunlight. As he removed his sunglasses, his eyes met Henry's. There was something different about the man. He looked like he had stepped out of Hollywood, but he wasn't playing a role. He was real, rugged, and at the same time warm. "Hey, boss," he said with a deep, friendly voice and a smile. "Looks like my Ferrari got a little fussy. I pushed my luck, but I managed to get it here." Henry looked him over, paused. The face seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. Probably just another rich guy who bought a car for show. He sighed. "These kinds of cars are all polish," he said dryly. "But still 4 wheels and an engine, right?" The man chuckled. "Exactly, but that engine's not feeling too enthusiastic today." Without saying another word, Henry grabbed his tools and popped open the hood, carefully, skillfully, as if he'd known that car for years. And that's how they met. Henry Carter, one of the last true masters of the old days, and Jason Momoa, a man whose insides were just as full as his impressive exterior. What brought them together seemed like a broken engine, but it was the beginning of something much bigger. As he stood in front of the dusty repair shop, Jason Momoa looked up for a moment at the old sign. Carter's Auto Repair. The letters had faded over the years, but the sign still hung there proudly. He took a deep breath, then stepped inside with long, confident strides. "Hey, boss," he said, his voice deep and friendly. "Mind taking a look at the Red Queen out there? I think she's giving me a little attitude." Henry straightened up from the engine and looked at Jason. He squinted slightly, sizing him up. There was something familiar about the man. Broad shoulders, long hair, tattoos on his arms, and warmth in his smile. He thought to himself, probably another rich showboat. Bought the car off a showroom floor and doesn't even know where the key goes. He replied with a heavy grunt, "Cars like that are too fancy, I'm old school." Jason chuckled, placing one hand on his belt and gesturing toward the engine. "Boss, anything that sits on 4 wheels is the same to me. In the end, they all carry a heart, don't they?" Henry smirked faintly. "An engine's an engine." Without another word, he grabbed his toolbox and lifted the hood of the Ferrari, carefully, with precision, as if he'd known this car all his life. Jason watched his hands with admiration. There was no showmanship, no fluff, just clarity, skill, and experience. "You work alone?" Jason asked, folding his arms across his chest. "Always," Henry replied. His voice was firm but not unfriendly. "These days, no one wants to repair anything. Yank the part out, slap a new one in, collect the gish. The soul of the job is gone." Jason nodded, his tone growing serious. "I respect that. That's true craftsmanship." Henry scoffed. "Words don't mean much. It's your hands that do the talking in this line of work." But right then a sharp pain shot through his chest. He paused with a slight spasm. His hand went to his chest, but he quickly composed himself so Jason wouldn't notice. Just a bit of fatigue. "It'll pass," he told himself. Jason, meanwhile, was leaning in, watching the old mechanic with admiration. This wasn't a performance. It was a ritual, and Henry was the last of its kind. "I can fix it," Henry muttered. "Just give me a few minutes." But there was one thing he didn't know. This wasn't just any customer. And this man, Jason Momoa, wouldn't just fix his car. He was about to change his entire life. Outside, the night air was beginning to cool, but inside the shop, the atmosphere was still thick. The scent of motor oil, metal, and decades of sweat clung to the walls. Henry's sleeves were rolled up, his hands stained black. He leaned into the Ferrari's engine, eyes filled with the sharp focus of experience. Jason stood quietly to the side, savoring the moment. This shop, this man, something about it felt right. Muttering to himself, Henry reached deeper into the engine. Too many wires, too many brains. These modern cars kill the feeling. Used to be, you'd listen to an engine. Now a screen tells you everything. Jason smiled gently. "I still listen, boss." Henry thought to himself, maybe this guy isn't what I assumed after all. As Henry looked at the tangled mess of wires in the engine, he shook his head slowly. You can't feel these machines anymore. No sound, no vibration, no soul, he muttered. Jason nodded, his brows slightly furrowed. "I like the old school guys, boss. The ones who still do things the right way deserve to stick around." Henry shot him a stern but sincere look. "If you're in this city, kid, you're in the wrong place. Around here, things get done fast. Not right." Jason smiled, but this time it was softer. He didn't reply. He just stood there, quiet, watching. It was respect, the kind shown not through words but presence. Henry tightened a bolt, adjusted the belt. He had touched thousands of cars over the years. This one was no different, at least on the surface. But something didn't feel right. His chest grew heavy, his breath shallowed. He ignored the pressure spreading through him. "Not now," he muttered to himself. "I've still got work to do." Jason continued to watch closely, as if recording every movement. "How long you been doing this?" he asked. Henry answered without looking up from the engine. 50 years. Opened this place in '74. Still holding it up." Jason's eyes widened with admiration. He nodded slowly. "Half a century? Wow. You don't see that kind of loyalty much anymore." Henry wiped his hands with a rag, then looked at Jason closely for the first time. "What do you do?" Jason gave a slight grin. "Me, I'm in the entertainment business." Henry raised an eyebrow. "Music? Film?" Jason hesitated a moment, then shrugged. "Film." Henry scoffed and sighed. Figures, Hollywood crowd, showing off with Ferraris. But Jason didn't take offense. He just smiled, as if used to comments like that. "Not even mine, actually. Borrowed it from a friend, but I do love cars. Truly." Henry paused for a moment. This time he nodded in approval. "At least you show respect. Most guys with money treat cars like trophies." Jason's smile faded slightly. His eyes darkened for a second. Suddenly, something had touched a nerve, though he didn't show it. "I've never cared for trophies, boss," he said quietly. Henry stared at him for a moment, but then he picked up his wrench and leaned back over the engine. As he tightened the final bolt, a sharp pain stabbed from his chest to his ribs. His hands trembled, his vision blurred, but he didn't give in. He clenched his jaw. "No," he whispered, "I'm going to finish this engine." He gave the last bolt a twist, then leaned back and wiped the sweat from his brow. "All right," he said, his voice rough and tired. "Give it a go." Jason got in the car and turned the key. The Ferrari responded with a grateful growl. The engine purred, smooth, rhythmic, powerful. Henry crossed his arms and nodded. "There you go. Old friend's back." Jason stepped out of the car as if reluctant to let go of the steering wheel. "That sound, boss, you worked magic." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet. "How much do I owe you?" Henry shook his head and gently pushed the wallet aside. "Nothing. Just hearing that engine run is enough for me." Jason narrowed his eyes, a surprised smile forming. "Seriously?" "Easy fix. Come back if it acts up again." Jason looked at him for a long moment, at a man who had just fixed more than an engine. Then he smiled. "In that case, next time I'll bring coffee." Henry replied with a dry grin. Just don't bring any of that fancy Starbucks crap." They both laughed, and in that moment, a bond was formed between a master and a man who truly understood him. As Jason slid his wallet back into his pocket, he paused for a moment and looked at Henry. "You're seriously not charging me anything?" Henry raised a hand and shook his head with a casual shrug. "Easy fix. If it comes back tomorrow, then we'll talk." Real surprise washed over Jason's face. "Man, you're like a walking romance novel from the old days." Henry rolled his eyes and let out a faint grumble. "Just don't show up with some ridiculous coffee. That's enough." Jason laughed. "Deal. No Starbucks. Maybe I'll bring a thermos. Brew it myself." Henry chuckled unintentionally. Jason climbed into the Ferrari and turned the key. The engine purred with a soft hum. He rolled down the window and looked back at Henry. "See you soon, Mr. Carter." Henry gave a small nod. "That's up to you." Jason drove off toward the street. As the sound of the car faded, Henry stood there for a moment, just watching. Who was that guy, he wondered, and why did he leave such a strange feeling in me? But suddenly his chest tightened again. He gripped the doorframe, breath catching in his throat. For a moment, the world blurred. He took a deep breath. It passed, just like always. He turned off the lights, lowered his head. One more day, one more car. But there was something he didn't know. That man who drove out of his shop that night, Jason Momoa, was going to wake up the next morning with a different plan. And this time, he wouldn't be coming empty-handed. The night in Los Angeles was quiet. The hum of the Ferrari's engine spread down the streets like a lullaby. But Jason's mind wasn't in the car. His hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, but his eyes were somewhere far beyond the road. One thing echoed in his mind. Henry Carter, that man's solitude, his quiet strength, and something in his eyes, the kind of integrity that couldn't be bought. Jason had met plenty of people in this city, actors, producers, billionaires. But Henry was different. When Jason got home, he walked quietly into the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, then opened his laptop. He typed into the search bar, Henry Carter Auto Repair, Los Angeles. The first site that popped up was plain, simple, outdated. No flashy branding, just a heading, Carter's Auto Repair. Honest work since 1974. Jason clicked through a few photos. Grainy frames. A younger Henry, not in a suit but in work clothes. Wrench in hand, pride in his face. He scrolled down. Forum comments. Messages from neighbors, from ordinary people. My car broke down on the freeway. Henry fixed it for free. Told me to pay him later. I needed to make it to my night shift. Henry came after hours and repaired my truck. Didn't even take extra camera. My dad brought his car to him for 30 years. When my dad passed away, Henry got his old Chevy running, free of charge, so we could drive it to the funeral. Jason's fingers froze over the keyboard. His eyes locked on the glow of the screen. This man wasn't just a mechanic. He was a cornerstone, a quiet hero. Jason took a deep breath, then nodded gently to himself. This couldn't go unnoticed. Henry Carter's name might be fading on the walls. But Jason knew one thing with absolute clarity. This man didn't deserve to be forgotten. Jason leaned in toward the laptop screen, slowly scrolling down with his fingers. One particular comment caught his eye. I was broke. My car broke down on the highway. Henry fixed it and said, pay me whenever you can. I never forgot that. Another one. I had to get to my night shift. Henry came back after closing up shop and fixed my truck. Refused to take extra money. And then one tightened Jason's throat. My dad took his car to Henry for 30 years. When he passed away, Henry repaired his old Chevy for free so we could drive it to the funeral. Jason's hands froze over the keyboard. Those words alone told the story of how great one man could be. Henry wasn't just a mechanic. He was a pillar of the neighborhood, a silent wall, the one everyone leaned on. But tragically, no one beyond that neighborhood knew just how strong that wall truly was. Jason leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the screen, mind overflowing. It hadn't even been an hour since he met Henry. But something inside him was shouting, this man must not be forgotten. He took a deep breath. I owe him, he thought, but not money. He'd never take that. So what did Henry value? His mind flashed back to their conversation in the shop. Back in the day, people used to repair parts, Henry had said. Now they just replace them. You used to feel those machines. And in that moment, a slow smile spread across Jason's face. Not money, legacy, the craft, the respect. I have to preserve this man's philosophy. He closed the laptop and picked up his phone. There was someone he needed to talk to. But before he could dial a number, the phone buzzed in his hand. Unknown caller. He furrowed his brows, hesitated for a second, then answered. Jason, he said in his deep, grounded tone. The voice on the other end was nervous. Hey, is this Jason Momoa? Jason straightened up. Who's this? This is Bill. I run the laundromat across from Henry Carter's shop. Jason's face shifted, eyes narrowing, grip tightening around the phone. Why was this man calling? How'd you get my number? He asked, short and to the point. Bill swallowed audibly. I know it's strange, but I saw you at the shop tonight, and I thought you might be the only one who could help. Jason's stomach dropped like he'd just been punched. All the lightness from earlier evaporated, but his voice stayed calm, controlled, hiding the dread blooming inside him. What happened, Bill? What happened? Jason asked, his voice suddenly heavy. There was exhaustion in Bill's voice. Henry, he's in the hospital. That sentence echoed through Jason's chest, as if someone had emptied him from the inside. He couldn't speak for a moment. His throat went dry. And to think, what was his plan? He was going to stop by the shop tomorrow, bring him a thermos of coffee, chat for a bit, maybe share a few more words over an open engine. But tomorrow, that forever delayed promise, might now be too late. Without hesitation, Jason grabbed his keys, threw on his jacket. He slammed the door shut behind him, his face carved in stone. Some debts don't wait. This was one of those moments. The streets of Los Angeles had sunk into night. Normally, the city never slept. But tonight, it felt like the world had paused, in quiet tribute to Jason's storm inside. It was silent, cold. As he pulled up to Carter's auto repair, a tightness seized his chest even before he got out of the car. In the beam of his headlights, the shop stood dark. Just the other night, the lights had still been on. Henry had been inside. Grease-stained hands, furrowed brows, that stubborn half-smile. Now, there was a sheet of paper taped to the glass door. Jason stepped out slowly. His footsteps echoed against the concrete. He approached the paper. The writing, scrawled in shaky pen, closed until further notice. His jaw tightened. What passed through his body wasn't anger. It was fear. The fear of losing something irreplaceable. Am I too late? He closed his eyes, and then, footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw a man in his 60s wearing a flannel shirt, tired but with high-eyed knowing eyes. You're the guy from the other night, aren't you? The man said softly. Jason dipped his head. Bill, he murmured. The man gave a faint, bittersweet smile. Sorry for calling you like that, but I knew it the moment I saw you. You're one of the rare ones, the ones who won't forget him. Jason's voice was low but steady. What happened? Bill shoved his hands into his pockets, rubbed his chin, then let out a deep sigh. A couple days ago, he collapsed while working. He'd been clutching his chest, still trying to finish a job. Customer found him. Henry was down on his knees. Jason clenched his fist. The image flooded his mind, Henry's brief pause, his hand to his chest, and yet still pushing forward. I was there. I saw it. I knew. And I did nothing. Where is he now? Jason's voice had shifted. It was a command. County General. He's been there since Monday. Without another word, Jason turned toward his car. Bill called out behind him. Wait, I don't know what kind of connection you have with him, but... Jason stopped. Didn't raise his shoulders. Just turned his head slightly. Bill continued. But Henry's one of the last men holding this neighborhood together. And right now, we don't know if he's coming back. Jason's hands were trembling on the steering wheel. Not from emotion, from determination. This wasn't just about visiting someone. This was about paying a debt, not in money, but in presence, in standing beside him. In continuing the story, not letting it end, he pressed the gas. Because sometimes what breaks isn't just an engine. Bill's words kept echoing in Jason's mind. That man, he's been holding this neighborhood up for years. But now I don't know if he's got the strength to come back. Jason's grip on the steering wheel had turned his knuckles white. Carter's Auto Repair wasn't just a shop. It was a man's life. And right now, that man was alone. But this wasn't how it would end. Jason knew that deep in his bones. This wasn't about fixing a broken engine anymore. This was about reviving a fractured legacy, County General Hospital. No one turned to look as Jason entered, but every step he took echoed sharply against the cold linoleum floor. Determined, quick, but quiet. The nurse at the front desk glanced at him briefly, but didn't flinch. Maybe she recognized him. Maybe not. Either way, she showed respect and didn't ask for a selfie. Henry Carter, Jason said, his voice calm but precise. Admitted a few days ago. The nurse typed a few things on her computer. Room 317, third floor, stable, but not saying much. Jason nodded, didn't say thank you, just walked. Elevator, hallway, door. He stared at the plaque, 317, took a deep breath, pushed it open. The room was dim. Soft blinking lights from medical machines cast a digital glow on the walls. The man lying in bed was a far cry from the one Jason had seen hunched over a Ferrari just days before. His face was pale. An IV line ran from his arm. A heart monitor beeped steadily at his chest. Slow, tired, Jason stood in the doorway for a few moments. Didn't look away. The man was still there, but he was exhausted, so exhausted. Then Henry's eyes slowly fluttered open, and the first thing he said was, "Damn it, your car breakdown again." Jason let out a laugh, raw, involuntary, but it caught in his throat. He smiled, but his eyes welled up. "She's running, boss," he said gently, "like a legend, straight from your hands." Henry let out a short grunt and clutched his chest. Not from pain, from sheer weariness. Jason stepped closer, pulled the chair up to the bedside. "You know something?" he said quietly. "You haven't just fixed engines. You've kept people going. I look back, and everywhere you've touched, someone kept moving forward because of it. But now it's your turn, Henry. You need help." Henry turned his head. His gaze searched Jason's face, like trying to see through the noise and into the truth. "Guys like you always speak in money," he whispered hoarsely. "What are you offering? A check?" Jason shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "This has nothing to do with money." Henry raised an eyebrow, barely, voice low and defensive. "Then what?" Jason leaned back and smiled. "Your name, on the wall above the door, on a garage that teaches everything you stood for. Carter's Technical Garage. With your principles, your craft, your legacy." Henry closed his eyes. A heavy silence filled the room, and then he mumbled, barely audible, "Damn poetic types." Jason burst into laughter, but something had shifted inside him. Even if Henry didn't say yes, he wasn't pushing him away anymore. And that was enough. Jason sat at Henry's hospital bedside. Henry cracked open his eyes and smiled, that grumpy humor still intact. "Car breakdown again, big guy?" he rasped. Jason smiled. "No, still runs like a dream." Henry let out a low chuckle, but it ended in a wince as he clutched his chest. Jason's smile faded. "How bad is it?" he asked softly. Henry shrugged. Even that gesture looked heavy. "Doctors say my heart stopped listening, like a busted engine, and this one's not so easy to replace." Jason nodded slowly. This wasn't just a rough week. This felt like a final warning. "Look, Henry," he leaned forward, voice calm but deep. "I want to help you." Henry furrowed his brow and studied Jason carefully. "Kid, I know who you are. You're famous. You've got money. And I can already guess what you're going to say. I'll pay all the bills, right?" Jason paused for a moment, then answered honestly, "Yeah, that was the plan." Henry turned his head away. Silence. Then he shook his head. No. Jason exhaled slowly and respected him for it. This man wanted to stand on his own 2 feet, all the way to the end. But if money wasn't the way in, Jason would find another door. Okay, he said gently. You don't want the money, I get it. But think about something else. That shop, the people you've helped for years. What happens to them when you're gone? Henry didn't reply, but his eyes locked on the blank wall ahead. Jason pressed on. Let it fall apart? Let it fade into silence? Is that how your story ends? Henry sighed deeply. I don't know, maybe. Jason took a step closer. I have an idea. Henry squinted. Of course you do. Jason smirked. Just hear me out, boss. Weeks later, the old Carter's Auto Repair sign was taken down. In its place, a brand new sign rose, Henry Carter Technical Garage, since 1974, and beneath it in bold letters, because some jobs deserve to be done right. When Henry protested, you didn't need to put my name on it, Jason simply said, this isn't just a building, it's your story. And Henry had no response. On opening day, a crowd gathered in front of the garage. Old customers, young mechanics, high school students seeing their first engine. Jason stood quietly in the back. This wasn't his stage. It was Henry's. And Henry, still the same old grump, barking at a nervous teen. If you're gonna hold that wrench like a damn teaspoon, go home. The kid quickly corrected his grip. Jason grinned. Henry hadn't changed. And that's exactly why this would work. That night, as Henry pulled the garage door shut, he paused, turned to Jason. Guess I owe you, big guy. Jason shook his head. No, you've already paid. Henry frowned. When the hell did I do that? Jason pointed up at the sign. By still teaching what is right. Henry stared at the sign for a long time, then smiled, eyes just shy of tears. One evening, Henry stepped outside alone and looked up at the new sign, hands on his hips, and whispered to himself, maybe this wasn't in the plan, but sometimes life drags you exactly where you're meant to be. And now he was certain his story wasn't over, not anymore, and now it never would be.